live.
Cool.
Hello. Thank you guys for coming to this live stream today. This is the Cardano or episode number 10. Can you believe it? 10 episodes already, man. It's crazy. I have Dewayne Cameron. We're going to be talking about liquid finance. So thank you for coming on, man. Before we jump into it, if you guys want to support this channel, the best way you can do so, actually with the Cardano Aura podcast, is just vote yes. This is the first Cardano vote in history. This podcast is on there if you want to look at the proposal. The link will be down in the description after this. There's a lot of great proposals. He has a proposal on there as well. The link for that will be down below as well. All you got to do is give us a thumbs up on that Project Catalyst app. If you did miss the registration period, however, you cannot vote for this one, but you will be able to vote in the next one. Another way you can support me is by delegating to Bloom. We minted the 8th block on the Cardano network. We've been here since the beginning, and we'll be here till your end. But, I also have a sponsor of this video today. It's Zelda Stake Pool. Make sure you guys click that link down below. Sponsored Stake Pool Zelda. They're just starting out. They need some support, so make sure you check out that link down below, and then we'll get started. So how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on, Big Pay, man. I really, appreciate everything you guys are doing at Bloom Pool. We're big fans of all the work that you guys do with the podcast and just being a part of the whole Cardano governance. So, from the start, having such a strong role in this, man, it's huge. So we are definitely aligned in our long-term view of Cardano, what we can see for this ecosystem moving forward into the future. We talk about 2020 and what we saw. I think that moving into 2021, there's just bright things for this whole ecosystem. So it's great, man, just being able to connect with, an actor like you who's just so public facing and running such a large, shop like something like Bloom. So
thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah, in the 10 minutes that we talked, I do feel our ideologies align. And like I just said, the 8th block in the system, I mean, you guys could have the first like DeFi contract ever on top of Cardano, man. And that's a beautiful thing, man. Even to me, maybe more beautiful than the 8th block,
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, the whole point about, Liquid and DeFi and just really having a blockchain like Cardano is saying, how can you bring apps that add utility and transactions and flow to the blockchain in a way that's, meaningful to the system, right? And for the validators, for the delegators and the stakers, that's everything, because that's ADA plus those transaction fees that apps like Liquid and, different dApps that are going to be produced, on top of the chain are going to, really kind of be a profit share for everyone who holds ADA.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's beautiful about, the more people that build, and a lot of people don't see this. They think that the only returns that you'll ever get is from staking and specifically from the rewards reserve. But as transactions increase over time, everyone gets more staking rewards, and that's actually by design. And it's specifically because those rewards go down over time, right? So as staking rewards go down, in the best world, transactions go up. So maybe your rewards go up, or maybe they stay the same, but just know it's not just counting on those reserves. So the first thing I wanted to get into today is what is DeFi? I feel like a lot of people in the Cardano community maybe have skipped Ethereum, have heard some horror stories about it, or it was too expensive for them. So what is DeFi for the person that's really just getting into the space?
Great question. So I think the whole concept of DeFi, and of course it, like you said, it lives on Ethereum mostly today. It's just the notion that, developers are taking decentralized finance to the next level, meaning we have this notion of decentralized blockchains that have smart contracts, and I can build a program that maybe locks some tokens over time, lends to a specific, actor under a certain set of rules, and, an interest or a yield is gained on that basically as a result of me maybe locking up my tokens for some time, as a result of someone else being able to, utilize those tokens and then pay an interest on that as a borrower. So that's like the kind of, basic notion of DeFi. In many ways, it's kind of similar to rebuilding the same banking service that you depend on when you go with a deposit, say to Bank of America or to JP Morgan or Wells Fargo, right? I say I want $1,000 deposit and Wells Fargo says they can pay me, maybe 5 basis points return on that or something like that in a high yield savings account, right? It's the same notion. They're going to lend that out to someone who's then going to pay them a higher interest, and then through their P&L they're going to pay me a cut of that, in this case somewhere around 5 basis. That to me is something that you can completely automate, and we already see it on Ethereum today, right? Just using smart contracts and the chain itself, you can completely automate that process of escrow and lending on chain. And it doesn't even need to be, peer-to-peer really. I think, Compound and Aave and some of these kind of like higher level margin borrow lending protocols are showing us that peer-to-pool is like the way forward. You can completely automate even the order matching process in a way that we haven't seen before in traditional finance. So DeFi is really, it's a very broad, high level term, but essentially it's just taking centralized traditional financial products, whether it be for borrowed lending, whether it's like swapping assets. You see Uniswap and SushiSwap and all these other, kind of like DEX protocols, whether they're AMMs or order book likes. They're all kind of just allowing you to trade between different assets in a decentralized way. Compound and Aave are all allowing you to, lend and borrow between different assets. If I have volatile Ethereum and I want exposure to stable coins, I can use a borrowed lending or a Uniswap to directly swap those assets. That's really what DeFi in a nutshell is. I think it all really started with the concept of MakerDAO having, a way to produce stable money from decentralized, ETH basically. So you could take your volatile ETH, lock it in this contract, and essentially mint a stable US dollar that was pegged at a certain rate. And you knew as long as you were able to basically keep your collateral at a certain rate. So if the price of ETH didn't drop too much or you paid back your loan over time, you could basically have access to stable US dollar, whoever you were at any time, basically a 24/7 US bank that anyone had access to. And that was kind of like the real birth of DeFi now. It's kind of been co-opted into now it's just US dollar tether and US dollar coin being used in different, DeFi contracts. And that's fine for now. I think it's still innovative because I think stable coins are in a way their own killer application because when you look at who really has access to stable US money and even what the euro dollar, that role that it plays in global finance, you realize that having trustless stable money on these different blockchains is a huge 0-1 for, just small banks, fintechs, companies around the world that have, US dollar denominated debt who want access to, US dollar products basically.
So my question for you is obviously that someone that's into cryptocurrency, this sounds like a beautiful world, right? But the only way that you get your average person into this stuff is incentives, right? So my question for you is how can you incentivize average users to be interested in this when you have centralized banks that can operate on fractional reserves and lower rates and you have the Feds artificially lowering rates? So, I mean, do you see a place for this actually being cheaper than central banks, or do you think because of fractional reserves and the way banking currently is that this is going to be a more safe and sustainable way, but not necessarily a cheaper way to do finance?
So there's multiple things there. I mean, that's a great point. I think the main thing is, okay, DeFi lives on Ethereum right now because of liquidity, right? It's not because Ethereum scales. Like, we know that's not the case. Like, you can only use DeFi and Ethereum at like 1 a.m. our time because it's so expensive to use it any other time of the day, right? Like it's the fact that DeFi in its current instance is only on Ethereum is just a testament to the fact that they've managed to lock up 15 or 16 billion of capital and no one else, EOS, Tezos, Polkadot, has meaningfully stepped into the picture in terms of building DeFi protocols. It's just too hard on those systems. And the UI UX is not enough to move the average or even the large, whale actor who's currently enjoying DeFi profits on Ethereum right now to those systems, right? The bet on Cardano is that here's a new way of doing development programming. Here's a new way of even engaging with these apps as an end user, right? Like a seamless, UX that, we just don't have in the Ethereum world. Like when you look at the MetaMask experience, even connecting to some of these DeFi apps and like being able to do simple, basic things to engage with the protocol, it's like, before you know it, you've already spent $30-40 to do simple things and you're not even like really, fully locked into the contract the way you want to be. And that's just what it is. It's just there's ways that they're finding to automate these things. There's like, Harvest Finance coming out and Yearn and all these different protocols that are in many ways like aggregating all the different, DeFi, DEXs and lending protocols that you can use to produce yield. And those are probably the way forward. But in Cardano, I think we'll just see a much more just like enterprise version of that from the start. I think that we're going to see integration with, KYC and like things like Atala Prism. So you'll have a decentralized opt-in to do KYC and AML. Like it'll be more frictionless than using the current banking system. Like if I'm a Nigerian user, for instance, and currently I have to, just to open a loan, use an app like OPay on my in my wallet and supply my social security number and all this information that, verifies me as a Nigerian citizen. If I can use Altala Prism on this, decentralized, money market, essentially, that allows me to borrow or lend or do both, why wouldn't I engage in that system when I can own and, have my own identity rather than giving it up to this centralized authority and get better rates, right? That's the kicker. You talk about incentives, like all of this is hinging on the fact that off the bat, the cost savings for the borrower and the earn potential in terms of what the current return is on the similar, money market, lending protocols compared to what you're going to yield in Cardano, just based on the fact that the cost of using our chain is so much lower than Ethereum, an order of magnitude or two, probably right off the bat, you're already talking about a much higher P&L that's going to the actual holders of the governance token and the users of the protocol, right? So just the earn rate is going to, off the bat, have a much higher margin compared to if we were building the exact same, lending solution on Ethereum. And there's many out there, Compound, Cream Finance, which took Compound and merged it with the DEX. Like there's all these different early DeFi protocols that are trying to do some notion of lending or swapping or both, but none of them really have gotten quite the incentives, the governance side of things, as well as the base protocol security totally figured out. Like we just saw the other day with Compound, like basic Oracle security mechanisms to have your price feed secured from, not a market that only has 1 million when your DAI market is, responsible for over $1.5 billion. Like that was just a simple error on Coinbase. And we saw it months ago when we were just reviewing the base protocol and doing our reverse engineering of these systems. We said, hey, there's no way that the Oracle price feed system for Coinbase Pro, which only does $1 million in 24-hour daily volume, is strong enough to be able to secure against a sophisticated attack from someone who wants to gain access of this DAI market on Compound that has control of $1.5 billion. So all you had to do was basically buy up enough DAI on Compound to spike the price. You have complete control of the Compound market. You could liquidate all of these outstanding borrowers now, and then you just repay that. You just bring the price back down on Coinbase when you're done. It's just a classic sandwich Oracle attack. And
yeah,
we've seen it all throughout 2020. There's a number of them. They're well documented, and it's like, wow, the fact that a company like Coinbase, VC backed, Bain Capital, and still, Compound, VC backed, really like supposed to be the leader in this whole DeFi, borrow lending space. They're still, getting, attacked by basic just vulnerabilities in their system when it comes to protocol security. So these are things that we don't want to replicate. We learn from the best. That's not to like smash on Compound at all. I think they did a great job when they industrialized the way that you do yield farming, the way that you do, governance token distribution. I think they have a very fair model. So we learned a lot from those guys, and we took, the best that we could from their protocol moving forward. But there's a lot of mistakes that you don't want to ever try to replicate. And you can learn from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing for Cardano. You look back at Bitcoin, you derive like what they did good, what they did bad from that, and the same thing with Ethereum. So I don't see you guys as trashing them, but it's important to learn from those mistakes.
100%. That's all it is. Right?
But yeah, I mean, that kind of leads right into it. So what is liquid finance?
Yeah, so liquid finance is basically the evolution of these DeFi money market protocols, right? So we're saying if you want to come to Liquid with your ADA and earn interest on that, by allowing another user to borrow that ADA from a pooled amount, you can use Liquid to earn, right? You can have a outstanding APY as basically a lender to the system, earning interest each block, or you can use Liquid on the flip side as a borrower. So if I want to basically put up some ADA or some US dollar stablecoin on Cardano and open a loan on Liquid, I can basically do that at a very basically predictable cost of opening my loan. So the loan origination fee will start at something like 25 basis points. So in comparison to like the 26, percent that it costs to, open some loans in, emerging markets around the world today, you can come to use Liquid as a Web3 DeFi app and know that every time you open a loan on the system, it's only going to cost you 0.25% to actually do that. And of course, you're going to have to collateralize some amount of the loan, but you can have a limit up to 75% of that loan, meaning for every $100 of ADA I put up, I can borrow $75 worth of ADA, right? And I can basically have that as a outstanding loan in the system that the actual ADA that I put up as collateral is paying off, right? So the actual amount that I'm owed to the system, it's like a net borrow APY that's calculated. based on how much I've supplied on the collateral side and how much I have outstanding as a borrower. So that's essentially how the system works and how it's going to function in its V1. Once we establish things like liquidity on chain, there's many different features and add-ons we can integrate with. We've already talked about Atala Prism as an identity layer. You can do a lot once you have that notion of identity tied to the system and to the outstanding borrowers in the protocol as an opt-in option, right? So you can use it if you would like to, or you can't, right? It's totally up to the end user. And there's also notions of using like an actual Liqwid DAO to introduce credit concepts. And you can do certain things when you have a group of trusted actors who are like running the protocol into the future. And this notion of having the Liqwid governance token, which is directly tied to the Liqwid DAO. So anytime there's a protocol update, anytime that there's a vote to introduce a new feature or a new proposal, maybe a hackathon for a bunch of developers who, we want to introduce a new credit concept on top of Liqwid, we can actually incentivize them. We can introduce that proposal through the Liqwid DAO process. Like it can all be automated into the actual governance module. And that's all going to be controlled through the Liqwid DAO system. And the whole concept there is, when we started Liqwid, we didn't start a company. We started an actual decentralized organization. And this was around the same time that actually Project Catalyst was getting kicked off. So things were actually happening in dual for us. And it was like, hey, we're learning a lot about Cardano's governance and decentralization process. We're taking the best of what we see from Voltaire and trying to introduce that with Liqwid. We're going to get to a point where the Liqwid DAO is its own full thing and it's controlling the distribution of the Liqwid governance token. And, anyone who has these governance tokens up to a set amount can introduce proposals and have their ideas heard, just like Project Catalyst, right? It's the same concept of having that notion of, just radical decentralization and just ideas and innovation flow. So we think about these things actually very similarly. We're very aligned with the Cardano decentralized and governance process in that aspect.
Yeah. So speaking about decentralization, one thing that I've mentioned a few times in my channel, and this may be inaccurate, is, as we move towards more ADA staked in the network, right? I mean, I think we're at like 65, 66% right now. I'm assuming with these DeFi protocols, you would have to unstake the ADA to then loan it, right?
No. So yes, you will have to unstake the ADA to loan it. But actually, the process for doing that is going to be a lot more automated than people think. So imagine if you had some ADA and it was staked to Bloompool, or it was staked to our stake pool. Shout out to Cardano 24 ADA pool. It's staked to one of these stake pools that are making blocks in Cardano. You come to Liqwid and you want to say, okay, here's my staked ADA. I want to put it in this pool to earn interest. Maybe someone borrows it from the pool. Maybe they don't. Maybe that amount of staked ADA just sits in the pool and is like now another supplier, right? What's going to end up happening is the same pool that you enter staked with, even though the smart contract is technically controlling your ADA, you will remain staked in that pool as long as that pool is not saturated and it's like performing and making blocks in the epoch, right? So the notion is don't remove the pools that you're already staked to. Only when a user comes who's borrowing such an amount of ADA that you actually have to remove either part or full from that user's stake, do you actually need to remove from the stake pool itself. And again, this is only a notion that we can do because of the fact that ADA has a risk-free rate in Cardano staking, right? So keep in mind, like,
that's awesome though, man. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of one of my biggest worries with DeFi, as these DeFi projects come and you have people, I mean, not you, but I think there will be protocols that are literally just chasing money, right? So when people are going for these chasing money protocols, you're lowering and lowering that total stake in the network, right? I do have somebody giving me a super chat. I really appreciate it. Also for the people asking questions, we're going to have a question time at the end, so save those questions for later. Make sure you guys stay to the end. I'll give you all the time you need to answer questions, or as long as much time as he has. So,
I got all the time in the world. I just want to say one thing though to that point. You're not going to have to worry about Liqwid being a system that's removing ADA from the total stake, because if anything, it's going to be, okay, I'm already staking my ADA, earning my 5% risk-free rate. I come to Liqwid to earn whatever the premium of, having that in this pool that can potentially be loaned out is, right? Whether it's 2-3% APY, whatever that is, and it will be variable, changing each block, right? Updated by the algorithm itself. These are all things that are going to be controlled by the actual supply and demand. But what you can imagine, and if you actually do the models and the simulations, and we just look at what you see with Ethereum and on Compound and OV today, there's going to be a lot of ADA supplied to the Liqwid pool. and probably only a decent to somewhat, like real demand for borrowing ADA. And here's why, right? People want access to borrowing stable coins, right? The real play is I want to supply my ADA and maybe borrow some stable coin, right? Or I want to just come and, look, I want to just come and lock up my ADA and earn interest, right? No, the real interest in borrowing ADA outside of traders and arbitragers on DEXs and things like that, we don't think that it's going to actually match the supply. And that's pretty consistent with what you see on, like I said, the current DeFi protocols in Ethereum and with just what our models and simulations show. So with that said, it's going to be, a nice thing, for someone who's like a power DeFi user to come into the system, and the same way you use Compound to, earn additional on top of your risk-free rate. But it's not going to be like, you probably won't even be making as much as just earning the risk-free rate at that point, except for super volatile times when maybe, either the liquidity on the supply side of the ADA pool is very low for some reason, or there's just a huge borrower demand outstanding, right? Either one of those things has to happen, because these are all just functions of supply and demand balancing each other out each block. That's kind of how the underpinning of the system is actually working. It's all built into this interest rate model that we've produced. And our CFO, Florian, he's got a long career working in, Swiss audit and banking, and he's done, finance his entire life. And he's basically come onto our team and has taken over the whole entire concept of building the actual, how can I say this, the simulation and the models that underpin the smart contracts themselves. So actually, we talk about the KEVM and Yella, and we're just getting to a place where we're ready to enter that world. But up until now, all of our work has been in, simulations in Excel, actually thinking about how do we get, the actual model for collateral limits and rates and, liquidation scheme, correct exactly to the point where we need it to be able to implement them in smart contracts. And now the next step is, okay, we have that information, that knowledge base to move forward from. And here we can start tweaking things and adjusting our models and seeing what works in different contracts and seeing what, is the ideal situation under, different liquidity. It's all about how liquid is the actual market at a given time, how much volume do you have on the supply side and the borrow side, and how volatile is the price of the asset, right? So the liquid pool itself, whether it's ADA, whether it's some other token itself that's on Cardano that has a pool, those are the two kind of main things that you have to account for in all of your models and simulations. And yeah, up until this point, we basically spent all of our time in analysis and design doing just that.
So you guys are going to be building in Marlow, right? Have you changed direction?
Yeah, we've actually changed somewhat because of this, because of the fact that Marlow is Plutus, right? So
Yeah.
we built in Marlow for the UN hackathon that we competed in, and our devs had a blast. Just kind of really getting into the Marlow source code. They were able to extend the actual data structure to build some of the mint and burn contracts that we wanted for the just for the proof of concept smart contracts that we built. But Marlow itself is going to compile to Plutus core. And the thing about that is the Plutus testnet itself won't be live, like fully live in a DevNet-like version until at some point in Q1 2021. And there's a lot of questions around at what point will we be able to just have a fully built constructed application in Plutus compared to if we were just to take the Yella DevNet that's already produced now, our Solidity bandwidth that we have on the core technical team, as well as the app inventive team and the knowledge they bring, and actually build the V1 system all in Solidity. Basically being able to use all the Ethereum, EVM, Solidity tooling, the libraries and Solidity that we would use that are bespoke to some of the DeFi protocols that we're kind of building similar versions of. So there's a lot that we get from the infrastructure and tooling side in Ethereum Solidity world that just doesn't exist in Plutus Marlow world quite yet. So I think actually we've pretty much confirmed with our dev partners, Twig as well. They're going to come in and do some formal verification on the Solidity code at the end, internal auditing of the contracts and whatnot. So basically we're aligned that the V1 of Liqwid is actually going to ship in Ethereum Solidity world, being run obviously on the KEVM and Yella sidechain for Cardano. But it just streamlines a lot that we need to do for developing the system. And actually, it opens up the timeline for when we can have users come in and start beta testing the system, right? And that's kind of was the most key thing to us. Like, how do we actually speed up some of the dev processes here rather than, having to just, sit and wait on when Plutus is exactly ready to ship? And, I watched all the Charles videos, man. I see, I know Plutus is going to be the island. I believe it. And when you look at actually the whole roadmap and what the Plutus application backend is going to give you, that whole framework, like that's going to be huge. And like we're actually pumped to build like a future V2 system entirely in Plutus, using the best of the best that we get from both Marlowe and Plutus, because at the end of the day it all compiles to Plutus core. But for the V1, we know what we're shipping in this V1 protocol. It's a very distinct, specific, it's a crypto collateralized lending facility, right? It's a fully secured credit facility is what you would call in traditional finance. And I think that to be able to build that in Solidity with the known tooling and libraries that you get means more to us in terms of getting product market fit, helping our community actually bootstrap and getting that support out there now in terms of having beta testing come in and UAT come in earlier in the cycle than just waiting for Plutus to be exactly where it needs to be for us to say, okay, we feel comfortable, starting to build there. So, we're building now, we're already working on the full smart contracts for the protocol that will run, that will be audited, that will be tested, before they actually make their way into the app.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man. I mean, especially if you have to wait till Q1 for Plutus, I mean, even with the stake pool stuff, I mean, every single day I was just waiting for the next thing, the next thing to get started, so I know completely where you're coming from. And it's interesting that you would still want to do V2 in Plutus after starting in Solidity. Do you think that there's going to be some benefits to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just the full out-of-the-box capabilities of Plutus will really shine in a way that, okay, you're still going to get some of the resource determination. You're still going to get some of the, low-cost performance security features that you get just out of the box by having Cardano sidechain, even if it's KVM Yella. But I still think that, and, we know this, like all of the features that were kind of make Cardano the smart contract system of choice, like what will make it the default in the future, it's going to be built into the Plutus application backend and that entire framework that they're working on. It won't so much be built in just these side chains that are bespoke for things like, Solidity code to run on Yella. So I think that that's something that we keep in mind. If we want to work with things like, the extended UTXO framework, Oracle pools, like all these things that we think about, just how it's going to interact with our application and just more natively building it into the Cardano system. I think that using Plutus for like a future version of the protocol is just going to allow us to do more with a little bit less, probably a lot less, to be honest, when it comes to the just how heavy doing certain things in Solidity is compared to doing it in Plutus. Like we understand that and get that.
Yeah, and I also understand needing the users as a test bed,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the DevNet's great. The DevNet is like huge because it allows us to say, hey, come in, beta test this application, show us what's great, show us what needs to improve from a UX, UI standpoint. And, we can fix that before this thing reaches mainnet, right? And like, I think that was, kudos to IOHK for like implementing something that's like, beyond just having a test net. It's really not a playground or a test net. This really is like a DevNet environment that, our devs are already starting to, load all of our contracts into and like, use as the dev environment that we're going to, build certain things from in terms of the entire Liquid protocol.
Yeah. So real quick, thanks again for the super chat. You said, can we answer some of the questions in chat, please? We're saving the AMA part, the questions, till the end. We have a lot of time. We still have, so just keep your questions, save them, put them in a doc somewhere, and we'll answer every single one at the end, man. So I apologize about that. So my question for you is how do these side chains, right? This EVM side chain, how does this tie into the actual network?
Great question, actually. So the actual connection from the KEVM Yellow sidechain into Cardano, I know that like IOHK is working on this like entire project with runtime verification, and they're kind of building what that framework and what that system looks like. Like technically underneath the working model, I believe it's just you're using the actual Cardano blockchain, obviously, for all execution and all smart contract computation, but it's all being compiled into it's like you have a Solidity EVM virtual machine clone that's just running as a sidechain for Cardano. That's essentially what they're building, right? So everything that we're building and all of our tooling and infrastructure is Solidity code, and the sidechain itself is Solidity EVM world. But it's just like if you were to take a snapshot of the EVM, the way it exists right now, and then build it as a virtual machine sidechain on top of Cardano, that just then compiles down to the Cardano chain itself, right? So
it compiles down into like a smart contract that you could write in Plutus, essentially?
No, you're writing the smart contracts in Solidity. It compiles down to whatever the Plutus assembly code is, whatever the maybe Plutus core itself, and I could be wrong in that. But whatever the actual assembly code that all of the smart contracts on Cardano are compiling down to, that's what any sidechain, whether it's Glow, whether it's the EVM, whether it's this C, sidechain that they're working on. So there's going to be many different smart contract sidechains. What they all compile down to will be the equivalent of the Cardano smart contract assembly code. It's not Plutus. Plutus is a higher level language.
So then will that just be like a more complex transaction?
Not really. No.
So
it's just a sidechain.
So okay, the way my knowledge works, right? How I'm developing my cryptocurrency knowledge, right, is I watched little additions to the Cardano chain, right? So we've started off with basic transactions, then with those transactions we've added token locking, we've also added metadata. So when you compile that down to the whatever you just called it, the Plutus machine language, we'll just say that, it might be wrong, but do you just include that in a transaction and then sign it? Like, how does that tie into the bigger picture?
You send your smart contract code that you're sending in the transaction to the actual, it's a sidechain that's connected. So you're sending it to the chain itself.
Oh, you're sending it to the sidechain and then locking it up here first.
So it's all happening on the sidechain, right? It's compiling to actual Cardano execution. Whether it's the KEVM or Glow, it actually doesn't matter, because all you're saying is you're allowing developers to code in whatever language they want to build their smart contracts in, and then you're just allowing it to execute on Cardano. That's all that's essentially happening. It's a clone of a virtual machine that exists on Ethereum EVM world that's being now compiled down to Cardano code, right? That's all that's functionally happening, actually. So it's going to happen for more than just EVM too. It's going to be Solidity world. I'm sure the Python, Ethereum code will come over too. I'm sure anything that happens with the Polkadot language, any WASM or eWASM or whatever the future of E2 smart contracts, they'll all find their way at sidechains on Cardano. That's the whole power of the KEVM and Yellow framework. You can bespokely build these just by having the semantics of whatever the programming language you want to build one for is. So it's a sweet science that runtime verification, works on. These guys have NASA, they have contracts with 3-letter agencies all across the feds, and they have, the brightest devs that, Illinois, Sherbana. So these guys work on this day and night, and that's kind of why IOHK contracted them specifically to build it. We're just getting the benefit of this downstream and building our application on top of it.
Yeah. I'm trying to connect the pieces, man. I just keep hearing more and more about this EVM testnet, and in about a month, it's all going to come together, and then I'll be able to explain it in a beautiful way to everybody. And I enjoyed picking your brain about it, man, for sure.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I wish I had more of a deep dive. I could get Holger on. Our CTO Holger, he's a really technical guy. He can really get into the weeds with you on, what exactly is compiling from our Solidity code down to the actual, whether it's Plutus assembly code or whatever we're going to call it, Plutus core, it may be, what that exact process is like. And he'll come on, I'm sure, at some point to talk about that. But yeah, that's definitely a deep conversation. Maybe we'll get runtime verification in it too, and have them give us a nice overview of everything that they're building.
Yeah, I would love that, man. So I'm also curious about your guys' sustainability model, and how does that compare to other Ethereum DeFi projects? Have you seen other projects and their sustainability model, and you can see a clear error there? And what is that error?
Did you say error?
Yeah, like an error in the sustainability model. It starts out too high, or.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the main thing I see in Ethereum DeFi today is the VCs are just way too early in the protocols, and no matter how they try to frame it and package it, it's like you still have your yield farming and you still have your governance token distribution, but at the end of the day, if you're already starting with, VCs that own a large percent and you're super diluted from that governance token from the start, it's never really going to be a community run project. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like. Like when you go to Compound right now and you look at their governance section, and, when you look at the actual players who are involved with deciding the outcomes of the whether it's, introducing a new token pair as a market on Compound, or whether it's reducing a certain percentage in the formulas that determine the rate model, right? Whatever it be, right? The actual deciders of this are the big VCs that back Compound before they came out with V2, who just, had huge vested interests, 25 mil, seed A, right? So that's a lot of money from the VC side that really dilutes the founding, core team of this thing before you distribute the token. And then it's like, okay, cool. Like everyone else is going to have the governance token at some point. And, I've earned some comp. I use the system, but I'm never going to have as much comp as, the early VCs and the Bain Capitals who were, before me and got like, $500,000 of this thing just to basically be VCs and not really provide much more than their capital. So I think having this new notion of like a fair launch token, like having a community run, DAO from the start of the actual project, that's like the biggest thing for like long-term sustainability, because it means that you don't have, one, dilution on the equity side of this from the founding team, but two, you don't have that vested interest from VC capital who's just trying to cash out at some point and just trying to actually, determine governance proposals and, protocol changes that only really benefit and, make number go up.
Make more money. Yeah.
Right. So it's just like that to me, like when you ask that question of sustainability, that's the biggest kind of shift in thought. Like, and when you look at it, there has been a change, like the new and upcoming protocols in Ethereum. It's all about this, no VC community, fair launch token for the whole entire community to be able to partake in. And Liquid is no different. Like we feel actually very strongly in line with like the up and coming DeFi Ethereum protocols. And we talk to these guys, like, I've talked to the founders at Barnbridge and the founders at, some of these other protocols. And I deeply understand why they decided to go the no VC route and model. Like at the end of the day, like we've talked to some of these VCs already. We've had these conversations and like, I'm a finance guy. I work in, management consulting, but I come from a finance background. I understand that not all VC money comes cheap. Like this stuff is expensive. And the dilution of a founding team, when you have that equity breakup and now you're basically indebted to a VC who just gave you some capital, but not much else on the side of, technical resources and guidance on a strategic standpoint, like that's just not at this early of a project worth it as much as, locking down a core team the way we have, having a CTO, a CFO, a product lead, and core developers who are accountable to your team, and having that just like glue that really holds the whole team together. That to me is like way more important than what we're really focusing on, rather than trying to, have the VC capital that says, hey, you have the runway to go for 2 years of just doing, discovery, whatever, and then launching a product on the end of that. Like we know that we have to ship something and we have to ship something very soon, but the sustainability of the model beyond V1 has to always be in the back of our minds. And it's why, we've gone this route of not accepting VC capital or, not really trying to actually dilute our equity as founders. Because
so how does the VC capital kind of dilute it? Do they just often take up a higher percentage of the initial coin offering because of the VC capital? Is that what makes it not fair?
Yeah. So when you go to the DeFi protocols in Ethereum, when you look at the actual breakout of tokens, right? And I wrote an article on this, kind of related to Liquid last week, and I'll send you the link to that. But when you actually look at the breakout of the founding team and how much tokens they take, and then you look at the investors and the early VCs, right, and what they're actually allocated, it's like almost double sometimes, 3 times as much. And it's because, they have so much VC money in the case of Compound,
double or 3 times as much as what Liquid's doing with the...
I mean, we have none, right? So the first money that we'll ever take is the grant from Catalyst funding, right? So that's if you consider that VC money, sure. I mean,
no, I don't consider that. But my question is, like, aren't you guys taking, say, 25% of the governance token for
the founding team and the strategic advisors are part of the actual Liquid like core team? Yes, we're taking 25% of the tokens. What we're not doing is having any sort of, token sale or ICO or giving to our, there's no early investors or insiders or VC backers of this project. So there's none of that equity dilution baked into that model. This is truly the founding team and the core devs and the technical side of our project, from the product lead, from the advisors who are helping us get to this point. That is who that 25% is being shared amongst, and equally so. So that is, and there's a vesting schedule tied to that. A 2.5-3 year vesting schedule. Each block, a certain percent will be allocated to the founding team according, pro rata to that breakout. So there's a whole model that comes attached to that. And
I was curious because you said that with the VCs, the people starting with those, you said 2 or 3x compared to, and what compared to what? That's what I was confused about.
Compared to the founding team. So the percentage that the VCs are taking of the governance token is 2 or 3x what the founding team is getting because they've already accepted so much VC capital.
Oh, okay.
That's the
Okay. I
point
see what
that
you're
I'm
saying.
making. So the point of the whole future and the whole current Ethereum protocols are saying, we're going to do the no VC community run project, because what you can actually do then is introduce this governance token that anyone can have access to. There are no VCs who are early insiders. And what you do is allow the actual DEXs of Ethereum or Cardano or any protocol that you're going to launch on to actually have the price discovery mechanism built into that for you. That's kind of what DeFi is turning into, for better or for worse, right? It means that you're not relying on these centralized exchanges or these coin market caps to basically list your token at a certain rate. You're determining basically through how much you allocate, through the vesting schedule, through the type of yield farming and user distribution that you do, right? All of these protocol incentives that you build into the actual protocol to distribute the token, that is how the actual system gets priced. That's how your actual token becomes listed on a DEX, if you want to do it that way. Like, there's many different avenues that you can take, but the whole notion is don't take the VC money before you actually have a community that's backing your project and your protocol, right? And that's like the whole kind of Ethereum no VC community run project notion in a nutshell, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it just seems better that way, just for all the reasons you listed.
It totally is. Yeah, I mean, when you think about the average investor who wants to be a part of DeFi, but actually, understands enough to take a part meaningfully in governance and wants to introduce proposals, they'll never have a shot in Compound or these Ethereum DeFi proposals. They'll just never have a chance against some of the VCs who are just going to come in and say, hey, this is going to be the future of this protocol. And, there's VCs on both sides, right? And I actually look at what the outstanding, proposals are and who's voting on what. But for the by and large, you see these VCs are here to enrich their bags and to, eventually offload them. So they're going to do what makes the most sense for them. Having that whole process not diluted from the start, to me, that's the biggest sustainability play that we can make. And, there's a whole notion of, past V1, do we form Liquid Labs and become a Delaware or maybe Wyoming based LLC and, truly go the route of building different features and integrations on top of Liquid? We have a chief product officer basically he's the integrations of building a white labeled service into Liquid, and using our chief finance officer and his connections in Swiss banking and that network itself. It actually opens the doors for a lot for us. We can offer products on top of Liquid's actual outstanding volume and liquidity pools that align us much closer to a traditional finance offering, like that OPay lending solution that I was talking about earlier. We can actually offer 0% collateral features when we have a white labeled service, like maybe a Swiss bank who can handle compliance and regulation for us. Maybe that connection with Atala Prism allows them to streamline the process of going through risk metrics and assessing different borrowers who are then using, the Liquid actual, US dollar stablecoin or whatever stablecoin launches on Cardano. We're using that liquidity pool to be able to actually supply these borrowers with 0% collateral. And we're just paying that bank a small percent cut for that white label compliance and regulation, service that they're really providing. The notion to do that, the future to do that is very clear cut for us. And we understand what that looks like. And the path is all through V1. So sustainability wise, we think a lot past just the V1 of this product. We're in this for the long haul. We've been in Cardano since the start. We like to think of ourselves as the OGs of this project because, really since 2017, when you look at my Twitter and my Reddit, the history shows I've stood time and time again for this project, for this community. When nobody wanted to be a part of, associating themselves with the Cardano ecosystem back in the deep days of, the bear market, I was here because I realized what we're building as an ecosystem is going to allow us to build liquids and to build the Bondleys and all these other DeFi, protocols are going to come after us, right? The framework, that granite, that foundation, IOHK was working on that since 2015, it was clear cut for anyone who was reading the technical dev updates and who was paying attention, right? And that's kind of where I've stood this whole time.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the long-term thinking. I think that's why a lot of us are drawn to Cardano, not just thinking 100%. In the moment, engineering. It's really thinking long-term with the engineering thrown in.
100%.
So I want to go over your proposal, but before we do that, I have one question specifically about governance. What do you vote on? What is the governance, and can the governance really interact with your sustainability model, and can it maybe ruin the secret sauce? Because
I think that, okay, so when you talk about secret sauce, there's many different kind of like notions of that. There's like the secret sauce for what makes the protocol work from
Yeah.
like, just a functionality standpoint. No, the governance model can't do that. What the governance model can do is say, if I want to change a protocol parameter, say right now the collateral limit for if I want to borrow ADA, I have to lock up 75% of it. That's just the default limit. Say that the supply of ADA on the actual supply side becomes, massive. You have 500,000 or sorry, 500,000,000 ADA locked up in this market, and you have, maybe very low borrow demand. If someone introduces a proposal to lower the collateral limit, so maybe I only need to lock up a lesser amount of ADA to borrow more, that can be something that the whole community votes on, right? There's going to be an entire, risk metric and kind of sequence of what are the actual protocol security risks for trying to introduce this change? What are the pros and the cons? What's the business case for doing this? Does it increase or, incentivize more users to borrow to do X, Y, or Z? Like that whole, very similar to how we have to outline for our Project Catalyst proposals, what that change is to the system, why it's needed, why we should grant this. That is going to be whether it's a proposal to change the protocol, whether it's a proposal to introduce developers to build a specific, maybe a feature that we have a whole hackathon, month-long hackathon, and say, hey, we're gonna basically put up a pot of 1,000 Liquid governance tokens for whoever can build an MVP of a credit feature on top of Liquid, right? These are the type of proposals that will flow through the system, right? Whether it's, okay, we want the Liquid core developers to directly integrate with this barter app because we think that Nigeria's economy and crypto is up and coming and we want to have the Venmo equivalent on an off ramp directly into Liquid. These are proposals that increase the future value of the system. You have a Liquid DAO model where you have all of these Liquid governance token holders who are together all trying to introduce proposals, vote on proposals, assess proposals that all increase the future value of the network for everyone. Because again, it's like Cardano and ADA, right? It all becomes a massive, profit and revenue sharing when you can actually have a network effect that says every single person that comes into this community adds value, whether it's on the developer side, whether it's on the marketing side, whether it's actually just using the protocol as a liquidity provider, as a lender, or as a borrower. So all of these things are in some way in our ecosystem adding future value to the network. Proposals in the governance sector is here to say, okay, everyone has a voice, whether it's voting, introducing, assessing. The same way Catalyst gives everyone in Cardano a voice, Liquid governance is here to basically do the same thing, but it's based around the actual Liquid ecosystem and protocol itself, not around, Cardano, right? That's the difference. Right.
So, yeah, thanks for that, man. That makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of what I was thinking is just, I like that it's not just the parameters, though. It's also proposals on direction,
It's way more than just the parameters, but the parameters are cool because like what Compound has done, there's like this, there's like a way that you can really automate the entire, if you're just doing a protocol parameter change, you can have like this time lock function in the governance module, and you can do some cool things that are directly tied to the outcome vote. If it meets a certain threshold and, whatever logic you build into that smart contract that it executes, after a certain period of time. And that's interesting if you're only doing like a specific, like that would be like a lip, how Cardano has SIPs. Like if someone introduced like a lip to do a specific change, but if we're doing like a, marketing proposal, or we want to do like a branding, campaign across maybe Ethiopia or Nigeria or South Africa, like those are also things that are going to flow through governance, and people are going to earn Liquid just by doing that. Developers are going to be brought into the system because we're going to incentivize them to earn the governance token to build specific apps that are already talking to the, the amount of liquidity that we've captured in our protocol, right? So whether it's, building an app for credit or building an app that does bespoke things around insurance, maybe, building an app that allows you to use data. Maybe we even hire a dev who directly does the integration to a Tala person for us. Like all of these things, whether you have hackathons or bounties that you put out there through proposals, they can all be used to incentivize new developers, new talent, new innovation to come into the ecosystem that, arguably wasn't going to come in without the incentivization. That's what governance is all about, like paying people to do like really effective, efficient work for the protocol.
Mm-hmm. That's very ambitious, man. I love it.
It is ambitious, but honestly, it's great because we get a lot from Cardano, In many ways, we're piggybacking so much of Voltaire and governance, and even the voting system we're going to tack on will be, an output of what we have right now from Voltaire. And
the
whole point is like governance as a service is coming to Cardano. Like, for better or for worse, we're going to see the day when Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash, and maybe even Bitcoin one day, are voting on, what they're going to improve on their, in blockchain based on, the Cardano voting system, because it's going to be that easy and simple to use. Like, knock on wood, we get there pretty soon. But I truly do think we're getting to a place where, governance as a service, being able to kind of reuse some of the modules that you're going to get when Voltaire is fully launched, not now when we're like pre-Voltaire, but like when Voltaire as a service is like out there and you have true governance on Cardano, every 6 weeks, rolling voting funds, different notions of voting, whether it's quadratic, whether it's, bicameral, all these different type of voting systems that you can have tied into Altala, tied into, things like ZK proof, so you get privacy. That's going to take Cardano to a place governance wise where you're going to be like, okay, if I'm a app that's building a system that relies on governance, the default network will always have to be Cardano, just from what I get from using it. It'll be akin to like using AWS for like platform as a service to run a small business, right? Everything you need from a server setup to manage your billing, to manage your time cycles is all out there, just built into it for you. And that's going to be governance for Cardano. When you look at Ethereum, there's like bespoke apps that do it. There's like Aragon if you want to set up a DAO. There's different apps if you want to do certain voting things, if you want to do things tied to identity. But when Cardano bundles that up and rolls it into a native feature, right, a native set of core features in the system that are out of the box, to me, that is when you have like, apps not only moving from Ethereum, totally new apps and experiences that we never had before Ethereum or before Cardano basically introduced this, governance mechanism that are going to launch on the system. So it's only a matter of time, pretty much.
Yeah. So it's pretty timely. The voting just started. We have until January 4th before it ends. So if you guys already have voted, just know that you can vote again. The way the voting system works is if you give me a check and then you decide, I hate this guy, you can give me a minus and submit the vote again, and it goes over the last one, right? But you need to keep track of what you're voting on, because if you forget, you say, oh, I voted for this, but I forget, then you're screwed, right? So you might have to redo it. Or so if you guys want to vote for Liqwid, you still can do that, right? Even if you've already voted. So I want him to go over his proposal, what he's asking for, kind of what is in the scope, and then maybe future funding or.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's in the scope for V1? Are you pulling up, or do you want me to just kind of?
Yeah, you can pull it up. You can just talk. It's whatever you want, man.
Yeah. So, Liquid V1 is building a borrow lend protocol. And what that is we've broken it up into 3 components, right? There's the smart contracts that you have to develop and build and audit and test. There's the front and back end of the actual app itself. There's the website desktop UI that's kind of integrated into that front and back end piece. And then there's the actual auditing of the smart contracts and really the entire protocol, right? So the way we've kind of broken up the task allocation is Twig is going to come in as, the smart contract and formal verification experts to audit internally the entire smart contract and protocol once we have pretty much a working Nair V1 application. So our internal core team, along with a few contracted Solidity devs that we've hired, are basically building out the entire smart contract for the V1 of the system, right? So what that is when you come into the system to use the borrow lend to connect your wallet, to basically to use the Liquidate contract to basically repay an outstanding borrower, like all of the ways that you can engage with the Liquid protocol through calling contracts, those are basically being bundled up into what we're calling smart contract development. And we're working on that right now. That's something that's basically been in development since we won the UN hackathon. We said, hey, we're doing this all right now in Marlow and thinking about Plutus. Now that we see IOHK taking a more aggressive role with runtime verification for the KEVM and Yella piece, we know that we're going to get Solidity interoperability from day one. So we basically pivoted into building these smart contracts in Solidity. And that's going to be a process that we pretty much plan to finish up right around the mid-February, late February timeline. Around that point, we'll also have kickstarted this, front-end, back-end development with the App Inventive team. And that's a team that's a blockchain, DeFi-based team in North India. And they've worked on, several Ethereum DeFi protocols. They've built apps on top of Fulcrum and DYDX, which are, similar kind of pooling margin lending protocols that are on Ethereum today. So they really understand the DeFi space. They understand Solidity as a language and EVM as a virtual machine. And they're really competent when it comes to app development specifically. So we're going to lean on them for a lot of our UI and UX to just really build a really nice mobile app, but also desktop, app that's really intuitive, has a lot of good information that users can, for the first time, come into the system and not just have to go right into the actual Liqwid app itself, but have a nice website that informs them, gives them a nice overview of the team, the protocol, how they can engage with the different products. Just kind of a really rolled up website that's going to launch with the V1. So that's what App Inventive is here for. And that's kind of like the entire team, actually, because Twig and App Inventive are the two kind of enterprise dev partners that we tapped and said, hey, for your experience, Twig building Plutus, building smart contracts on Cardano, they understand the framework, and they're going to play a much more internal auditing, kind of like strategic protocol level guidance in this V1. But come V2, we talked about rebuilding the system in Plutus, and I've already had deep conversations with their devs and lead engineers about what it looks like to have them play a much more meaningful role in terms of developing the actual smart contract system in Plutus when that V2 comes. But App Inventive is here to build the app, the front end, back end of the actual app itself. And yeah, like I said, our core team is actually working on the smart contracts themselves with the Solidity dev that we've contracted out. So we're hitting on all fronts. We have like an updated roadmap that we'll put out there. The one on our website right now is much more reflective of a time when we thought we were building the whole app in Plutus. And now that we know that, we've committed to using Solidity and streamlining certain things, we just need to update, what that looks like. And I'll build a nice Gantt chart that shows, smart contracts, app front end, back end, and actual smart contract audits and what that kind of timeline looks like to V1 launch. But again, we're timing it up with not only the launch of, Cardano mainnet, but we want an application that as early as possible, we can have users come in and beta test, even if it's still on DevNet. So that's kind of like the real end goal of the team here. So it all starts with, obviously building the smart contract protocol and the entire kind of set of calls that you're going to have within the system, and then building around that.
So how much are you guys asking for? I think I saw it was like 330,000 ADA, but keep in mind that was at like 10.5 cents, right? So it's
yeah. I think the official number is 365,000 ADA. And it shakes out to something around 40K, I think. It might be 38,500 ADA or 385,000 ADA. But the official number in US dollars is around $40,000. And what that's going to afford us is basically the first 6 weeks of development. The App Inventive team is requesting like a monthly budget to be able to work on this project through the V1 launch. So this is going to basically fund not only a month of their, full, almost 10-person team when it comes to engineers, UI, UX, just data analysts, blockchain analysts, and a project manager lead, and QA as well. But it's also going to fund our core developers who are working on the smart contract side of this, the Solidity contracted developer that we have, as well as start to fund the actual Twig team who's going to come in on the back end. They're only the Twig budget is going to come from a future fund. So most of this Fund 2 budget is going to our App Inventive and core developers because we're working on the front end, back end, and the smart contract protocol right now.
Yeah, because it just doesn't seem like enough, for the scope.
No, it's certainly not. I mean, the whole point of Catalyst, and I think this was pretty clear cut from the start, was there's going to be rolling rounds every 6 to 8 weeks. So the amount that you request, by no means this is the entire cost of what it's going to take to roll out the entire, project. But I think that as a starting point to kick off, meaningfully full-on sprints in development around, this 40K number is actually what it's going to take for us to have enough runway to say, hey, we can produce 2 or 3 progress reports, come back to this Cardano community, show you guys the update, from a technical standpoint, what we've made from the start since receiving that funding, and then, request an additional amount, whether it's another 40K or a number in that ballpark, right? And that's going to basically say every 6 to 8 weeks, we have enough bandwidth to keep developing, keep going through the V1 launch. And, whether it's 2, 3, maybe 4 rounds of actual Catalyst funding, once we get to that V1 launch standpoint, and once you really start distributing the user governance tokens, like we're not going to be coming back to Project Catalyst for funding, right? You talk about sustainability and like what that model looks like for us. Like there's a future past V1 where we can form Liquid Labs. We have a live application and protocol that we can build features and integrations on top of. There's a sustainability model that comes with truly starting a venture as Liquid Labs itself that's working with this decentralized finance protocol. And that's kind of like the place, that's our end vision, like future state that we want to get to, because that means that we have something that's truly sustainable. We have a governance, aspect of this where the community owns the majority of these liquid tokens. They decide through the proposals and through the voting rounds how we iterate in the future, what our developers build on top, the key features that they think are most important, what we actually need to be doing to add future value to the protocol. And we as Liquid Labs, we have a route to then, go after VC funding to build future protocol versions and to build future, iterations of the system and features on top. And we're completely independent from the actual core functioning of the actual protocol itself. So in our standpoint, it imitates what IOHK is trying to do with Cardano right now in many ways. You have a development firm like IOHK who's building on top of this decentralized financial infrastructure. They're definitely going to have, products and features that they build on top. When you just look at IOHK Enterprise, you can tell that this is the route that they're heading. And it starts with, Ethiopia, and it starts with Georgia and Mongolia, but it ends up in, South Africa and Nigeria and, countries across Southeast Asia and Europe, because that's just the inevitable route. Once you have one or two nations who you've launched a central bank digital currency on, now everybody wants that service from IOHK, right? And in the same way, we can, I work for a consulting firm, right? And the thing that we do is public, consulting for large government agencies, mainly across, the federal, state, some at the local level as well. So we're already used to coming in, implementing new software systems, working with government agencies to update, from analog to digital, build a bespoke system for them to manage their processes. A lot of the things that you get from Atala Prism and Atala Scan, these are identity, these are supply chain and insurance products that you can actually build on top and actually integrate with Liquid. And now you have, a true private, joint public-private partnership that's going after different deals together, right? And that's the future of Liquid Labs. That's post V1. But I think the sustainability piece is really there. We think about this as we build the V1 system, because we know inevitably, catalyst funding can't just be it. Whether it's a few rounds that we need this to get through V1, what the future looks like is something that's been at the top of our minds since we really started this project.
I like it, man. To me, it sounds like one of the most promising projects on Project Catalyst thus far. And it's nice to see you guys here this early.
That. Yours as well, man. I want to say something about podcasts because I think they're huge. I'm sad to see the Cardano Effect guys go, man. Really, that hurt me because as someone who's been in this community since the start, I mean, Rick and Philippe were here. I talk about myself, what I did on Twitter, bashing the ETHs and sorry, but just coming back at those guys who were, calling Cardano and throwing FUD at us. That was easy. What was hard was producing content and having a working, functioning podcast that, people depended on, tuned in. You could bring new people into Cardano through the Cardano Effect. And now, man, through your podcast and through all, Kaizen and all these other podcasts that are popping up. So I think, there's a place for all of these things to build a truly sustainable, robust community. And we're doing it with Cardano, Yeah, we bicker and we battle about, too many podcasts, but at the end of the day, man, everyone has their role and place to play. And I think that, there's a ton of good ideas in Catalyst. I voted, yes, for a lot of those, really cool ideas that I thought are going to actually improve the future value of the ecosystem, because it's not just DeFi, bro. Everyone needs a way to access decentralized finance. And I feel strongly about what these protocols are building. But to say that, DeFi is the end all be all when there's things like, social and identity and, just much other important education, just content that needs to be produced to get people to understand Cardano, dApps at a basic level. We have to get to that point, and it takes a whole community. It's not just a single project building something. So I just wanted to make that point while I was on your podcast.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm sad to see the Cardano Effect go too, and the timing just seemed off to me. Right? It just seemed like they stuck it through all the hard times. In 2018, I was making videos, but they weren't as ambitious as the Cardano Effect, always having guests on, always having to find content, with the long form medium, and they work their asses off for that long. And then right when we're finally on the cusp, it closes down. It's really sad to see it go, man. I agree. And I do feel, obviously not the people watching this, but the people complaining and saying podcasts hold no real value. They haven't looked at my analytics, man. They haven't seen all the unique viewers and all of the comments that I get every day and say, hey, man, I found Cardano because of this, and I saw your passion, and I saw Kaizen's passion, or Dave, or whoever, and I realized that there's something to this, because people aren't just going to be, they're not going to have this much passion and spend this much time doing something without there being something there, right? And when they see that, they see other people have this passion, they start diving into it themselves, and they look at Charles, and they look at the videos, and over time, say 6 months, they start to fill in the bigger picture. And then maybe a year from then, they're picking up their own shovel, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And when we get to that place where everyone's picking up a shovel, like, think about the network effect. Think about how quickly that scales, like all of Cardano, everything that we're working on and building, like, it's going to be a thing of beauty. Like, I think 2021 is going to be an exciting time for this whole, community ecosystem.
Yeah, and I agree. And also, we're entering a bull market. We might go back down, but this is a big deal. We're going to start getting media coverage. And what happens when you get media coverage is YouTube views go up, where Big Pay, he's not getting 2,000 anymore. He's getting 40,000, 40,000, 60,000, 60,000. And all of those viewers are not Cardano community members. They're not OGs. They're new people trying to make a quick buck because they heard they can on the media. So the only thing you can do is keep the people that are going to pick up the shovel, that see the value in this, that see the financial freedom. And a lot of people don't see that, right? Because if you were here since 2017, you watched it. You watched the crypto crows. You watched all of these people that went up to 100, 200,000 views every video, and now they're back down to, say, 2,000 to 6,000 every single video. And this next bull market, it's going to be the same thing. And you need people to advertise these ideas and to educate. And I think people will see the value soon. But close that note. We'll get to the questions.
Sure, yeah.
What's up, Kaizen? Thanks for swinging by. What's up, Imonti? What's up, Neon? I've never seen you before, Neon. How you doing today, man?
I was looking at a tweet the other day. It was from Nico. He was showing like the Google search results for like Bitcoin and Cardano, and like, yeah, while it's like ticked up a little, when you compare this to 2017, like not even close. Like,
yeah,
nothing's happened. Like,
yeah, and that's what I think. There's like institutional investors that are raising the price, 100%. And then what's going to happen is it's going to be your retail, your average people, but your average people are the one who watches YouTube videos,
exactly.
not institutions,
and who hopefully build too. That's the hope.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Dave said, hi, Dewayne. Thanks for coming by, Dave. I really appreciate it. I have a few questions in regards to what happens if someone can't pay back money or they declare bankruptcy. Is there a third party here for disputes? Do investors lose money? ?
No, there's no third party, and it's completely non-custodial. And through the liquidation process on the actual protocol, you're incentivizing traders and arbitragers to call a simple contract, and we'll build bots that automate the entire call for this contract, but it's called the Liquidate Contract. And what that does is you have an outstanding view of the snapshot, if you will, of all the outstanding borrows in the liquid market across all the different pools, and you can say, okay, there's a ADA outstanding borrow that's now underneath that 75% collateral limit. I want to liquidate or pay back the amount that they are basically outstanding over their borrow amount. So each borrower, the amount of collateral that you post determines how much you can borrow in the system, right? This whole collateral limit of 75% that we've talked about, that's what's determining that. Once I have a loan in the system that's outstanding over that borrow limit, any liquidator in the system can call that contract and pay back a part of my outstanding loan that's become, if you will, underwater, right? So what that trader would do is basically they're earning 5 to 10%, basically liquidation, if you will, incentive that you're paying from the collateral of the actual borrower, right? So that person who put up that 75% collateral limit, 5 to 10 of that is going to straight to the liquidator who's paying back their contract, basically, paying back part of their loan. That borrower can still have a loan outstanding in the system, right? It's just that the part of their loan that made them underwater is now being repaid by that liquidator, and they're in the process paying up a part of their collateral. So the easiest way to think about it is when you have a mortgage at a bank and the only collateral you have for that loan, your mortgage, is your home, right? So when you default on that loan, right? On that mortgage, what does your bank do? It repossesses the home, but then it has to sell that home. It has to liquidate that so they want their net liabilities to go back, closer to positive, because right now it's negative, right? Because you have a loan that you just defaulted on, you're not paying, and they have an asset that they don't want, right? So you need to sell that to someone, usually at a discount. And that's why you see things like, the different bargain buys that you have when banks have to resell, repossess homes, right? And the same thing is happening in crypto. When you look at Compound, when you look at OB, when you look at MakerDAO, all these systems are doing is when the point of liquidation happens, there's either an all-out basically buy. So liquidators who have large amounts of the crypto can basically bargain at certain bids to buy it, but you're always giving them a discount and you're incentivizing them to come in and step in as the buyer of last resort. That's what secures the system and keeps everything non-custodial. So no, there's no third party. It's all handled through these traders. At the end of the day, when you automate it through like bots, it becomes like a trading strategy because they realize every time my bot observes on the blockchain that there's an outstanding loan that I can liquidate, it's just like I just made 5 to 10% just for free, basically, just by calling this contract, minus the cost of transaction fees, obviously, and the price risk if the price changes over time. But most of these traders and arbitragers are just going to call the contract, receive the 5 to 10% discount, and then swap that into whatever stable coin they want, and then move on because they just made 5%, 10% money. So that's how that works.
Thanks, man. Yeah, this stuff's so interesting to me.
Yeah, it's definitely like one of the key parts of the system that we spend a lot of time thinking deeply about. I mean, it basically is what keeps you from all default risk in the network because to Dave's point, like if you allow the network to not have that liquidation mechanism. And there's outstanding questions. Like some people say that in Compound, the liquidation mechanism is too harsh, meaning like you allowed that whole Oracle exploit to happen because the Compound liquidation says as soon as a loan becomes outstanding over this limit, no matter what the recent price was or anything, automatically allow anyone to liquidate it. And that's just how they keep their system secure, right? So we're thinking about, designing a system that might more gracefully allow liquidation, but it's all a matter of what you can actually do, what the system enables, what's the most secure in terms of keeping the system from default risk. But yeah.
Is there a way to allow users to define the risk, to allow? No.
No, there isn't. No, because it needs to be a protocol set logic because think about it, it's being controlled by a smart contract at that point. So anyone, once you become like everything's automated once you enter the market, right? So you have a defined collateral limit. It can change depending on the pool. So the ADA pool, maybe that collateral limit is 75%, but maybe the actual, the pool for the US dollar stablecoin on Cardano, maybe the collateral limit is maybe much lower. Maybe it's 50%, right? So I need to put up less to be able to, take out, basically more is what I'm saying. Like if that's the system that you enable, that's fine, but it's a different risk trade-off at that point because you're saying this user has put up less collateral in the system. The incentive that they're going to have to lose that collateral is lower than the user who's put up, 75% of the outstanding loan. You know what I mean? So that's the trade-off that you're making right there. There's up and coming DeFi protocols where they work on this like instant liquidation process where you can only borrow stablecoin, but you don't actually collateralize it. But as soon as it becomes like, 5%, basically under on your loan, you can be liquidated. And it's a little harsher than even Compound because what you're saying is the liquidators have all of the incentive to just wait for that exact moment when you borrow the outstanding interest on that loan and then just grab the entire, loan amount. So it's like, it's for traders to use basically, but for a true system that's like retail facing, you need to have something that's like a graceful liquidation process that's also securing the system from default risk. So yeah, we think about that a lot. It's as important as making sure your price feeds are, secure from the Oracle standpoint.
Kaizen Crypto said, does the stability fee for borrowing capital change as the underlying value of the collateral goes up or down? Good question, Kaizen. Thanks for coming by, man.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So we don't call it a stability fee. I think that's like a MakerDAO term, but we do have like the borrow interest rate, obviously, the APY that borrowers are paying on the loan. And yeah, it's variable and it's a function of supply and demand in the system. So I gave the example before of ADA just because it's the simplest, right? So we have the ADA liquid pool, and let's say there's just a large supply, maybe 500 million or so, right? The demand for that is going to determine what the actual outstanding borrow rate is, right? Because think about this. If I have a huge amount of supply in my ADA market, but very low demand on the borrow side, the rate that you should be paying to actually supply ADA, or the rate that you should receive to supply ADA should be really low. And the rate that you should pay to borrow ADA should also be really low because there's a huge amount of supply and not much demand. Now, if we had the flip side of this, where we have not much ADA in the liquid ADA pool, but a huge outstanding borrow demand, then the rate of interest that you should earn as a lender for ADA should be super high, right? But also the rate of borrowing should be commensurately really high because you're really close to like what we call the utilization rate. So all of this is a function of supply and demand, but also how utilized that market is, right? So the liquidity on the supply side, yes, but how much liquidity do you have on the borrow demand side? Because if it's not much, the rate should be super low because that's just how the supply demand ratio works out. But if it's super high demand on the borrow side, you need to have rates that are as high because what you want is as that utilization, as the total liquidity creeps towards 100, you want to disincentivize new borrowers in the system, right? Because you don't ever want to have a borrower come into the system, but there's not enough liquidity on the supply side to service them, right? So to do that, you basically build a rate model that as that utilization of the market creeps towards 100, it gets really expensive to open up a new loan. And on the same side, those earners are earning a higher percentage, much higher, right? Because all of their capital is being used at that point, right? So it's all basically a function of supply and demand and actual liquidity in the system. And yes, it's variable. So it's going to update pretty much each block. Each time there's a transaction with the liquid pool, there's going to be basically an archive of all of the interest rates that you saw on the borrow and on the lend side. And the algorithm is basically going to update that to reflect the new liquidity or the new price action conditions, basically. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good question, Kaizen.
Great question.
Mr. Multi-Checker said, "Hi, Dewayne. How can you elaborate a bit how oracles will fit into the Liqwid or fit into Liqwid in the future?"
Sure.
That was hard for me, man.
Great question. So we think about price oracles a lot, and having secure price feed data and what that looks like. So the V1 of the system, like we talked about, building it in Solidity. What you can do at that time is instead of what Compound did, where they just had an open price feed system, but had one market like Coinbase Pro with a very low volume that was basically securing the price for their largest market, the DAI market. You can take a weighted average of all of the outstanding exchanges and the total volume that they have between them and use that basically to determine the price for each market. And that's pretty much what we're going to end up building for the V1 of the system. So what that will look like is we take Binance US, Kraken, Coinbase, OKEX, all these exchanges, and we say, okay, the volume across these exchanges, let's take a weighted average of that, and that average determines the price for, say, the ADA market, say the US dollar market on, the US dollar coin on Cardano, right? So then that is how you basically secure your Oracle system, because the outstanding volume from all of those exchanges is, somewhat, it's going to be like in the billions, right? But the outstanding volume that's going to be securing on Liquid's market will be, maybe a couple million, maybe if we're, really lucky, 100 million or so. So all you want to really make sure you're doing when you build these Oracle and, when you try to talk about security into the Oracle mechanism is making sure that the data that you're sourcing it from is from exchanges with much higher volume than your decentralized exchange protocol. Because all you have to do as an attacker from like a malicious standpoint is once you affect the price on that centralized exchange enough to give bad price data because you've manipulated the price that much by either buying or shorting that much of the token, you now have complete control of that decentralized protocol for that market, right? So that's what happened with Compound a few weeks ago with the DAI market. And that's kind of the example that I gave above. So how do you protect yourself against that? You take a volume weighted average of this, and you can also build different mechanisms into the system that are tied to the Oracle. So you can have like a time block that says, okay, if I receive an Oracle price that's like plus or 5%, standard deviation outside of like the archive, kind of historical prices that we've received, maybe receive it or call back or try to basically retrieve that price from a different exchange or a different mechanism that's not tied to the way you're getting it now, because that data may be malicious or something, like a check in the system that basically says if something is outside of a certain range of confidence bands, you should take and try to source data from a different place. It's all about how you design the Oracle system to interact with the actual smart contracts. And, we think about these deeply because we're in that stage of development. But yeah, right now, the safest way that we think about this is, again, taking a volume weighted average and making sure that at all times, the total volume across these exchanges is, double, triple what actually is on, Liquid's market. And in many cases, it'll be much more than that, obviously, because these are like very large exchanges, and unlike Compound, we're not just going to take it from a single one.
Yeah. Did the recent announcement from Charles Hoskinson about Singularity Net, and then also Wolfram and how they're going to deal with oracles, did that change your guys' direction at all? Are you guys looking at that?
I mean, definitely something we look about and think about. I mean, it's exciting just to see. I mean, Siri sources data from Wolfram Alpha. It's a massive data set, right? And very, the quality and assurance level that's built into a system like that is obviously something you'd like to be able to tap into. When that's going to be, ready for kind of our use and developers is, I guess, the real question.
Yeah.
It's something that we think about a lot. If a V2 system comes along, we can use data sourced from Wolfram, 100% a move that we'll pivot towards. But I think we have a very secure mechanism for pricing Oracle data. Granted, you make sure that the volume weighted average and the total volume is much higher than what's on the Liquid market at all times. And that's something that you can, in many ways, automate through the way you connect the Oracle system to the smart contract.
Okay, thank you. It's another good question. Dave said, thanks Big Pay and Dewayne for answering the question. Love the drive in this community to charge forward and prove old systems are limited, corrupt, and time to see what else is on offer. Thanks, Dave. I really appreciate that, man. Hello, Teresa. Thanks for coming by.
I think, old systems are on their way out. I think the coolest thing about Cardano is it plans on talking to those old systems, right? It plans on building integrations. I hear Charles talk about, what it would look like to build integrations into the Bank of International Settlements. That's huge. That's talking about just enabling access, Web 2 to Web 3 hooks that, no other blockchain is going to have. I guarantee it. So it's going to set us apart, being in Hyperledger. I have some connections at R3 Corda and trying to talk about what that would look like as another, enterprise connection for Cardano, because there's so much deal flow that comes out of that, and they need public blockchains. They need something that can scale beyond just what Ethereum gives them. So Cardano could be that really sweet spot that's not just, DeFi and, Web3 world, but also connecting that kind of old world legacy system that, Dave is talking about, and rightfully so. But there's so much value and liquidity that lives in that old system that you'd like to bring over without, you'd like to digitize and tokenize as much of that as you can and put that on Cardano, because that's when you're really winning,
Yeah.
Not just let's rebuild the wheel.
And we do the same thing with institutions too. When you do the peer-reviewed academic papers, that was kind of the step
100%.
one of bringing in old institutions and showing the value of kind of the new and the old working together.
Right. And I mean, so many examples of that from IOHK. Even when you look at Marlowe and what that is, man, Marlowe is a genius from the past. Microsoft researchers and developers, bank guys who found out about Haskell coding and, learned about building DSLs in Haskell. All these different amazing kind of math and finance tech minds came together to build these different, primitives around DSLs and finance DSL specifically. And then IOHK just took all that from the late 90s, early 2000s and built Marlowe. And it's just wow, Simon Thompson, absolute genius. His whole team, University of Kent, these guys are amazing. What they've actually produced is something that, to me, bar none, sets Cardano apart from every other blockchain. When you say that, the young developer who's, a finance or a tech-focused mind, but not a full-on dev, can build bespoke DeFi applications, automated templates for all of these things out of the box. That is not going to, be taken lightly. I think people are going to run with that. People are going to build local solutions. They're going to integrate them with Prism. They're going to build apps around that. It's going to be, what we think about smart contract development now and how it's oh, you got to have these, Ethereum developers code up everything for you. That whole model will totally change with Cardano. And I'm really just excited. It's like almost like the democratization of development is what you're really getting when you talk about not just Marlowe, but an AI DSL. You talk about a DSL for insurance and law that might come in the future, right? Like those type of things are going to really kind of set us apart and actually democratize the entire process of smart contract development beyond just, building a DApp and hiring a developer to do it, So that's going to be actually really cool.
Yeah. Thank you for that insight, man. I feel like that's it's something that a lot of people can't derive from the knowledge that they've gathered this far, right? I mean, if you haven't really dove into Marlowe, then you're just not going to, because I didn't know that, so
yeah.
Thanks for that.
There's real examples too. I mean, like, if I'm a local water municipality and I want to offer 0 coupon bonds, like I can do that on Marlowe today. I can code that up right now and I can offer them to investors, saving hella money that I would have to pay financial institutions and banks to offer for me. I just became my own bank and financial institution. I just created my own security that is backed by my own product. Investors are gonna, there's gonna be a huge demand for these.
Yeah, and I feel like it's easy to explain to investors too, with just the puzzle pieces, and you're like, well, this is how it works. It's pretty simple,
Right, exactly. Yeah, they'll get it.
Yeah. So Crypto Simp Swagpool said, are the liquidity pools going to accept other assets outside of ADA, native tokens, stable coins?
100%. That's a great question. I mean, I think that stable coins are going to be the real demand. Like when you look at DeFi right now, and I've talked about this a lot, people are like, what's the first killer application of crypto? I think it's stable coins, right? I think that access to US dollar from anyone, anywhere in the world is what's really the key feature for driving crypto into the future. I think Liquid, has to play a part of that. Several different stable coins, not just US dollar coin. We think about Great British Pound, the Euro, the Nigerian Naira, the South African Rand. All of these stablecoins are going to live on Cardano in some way in the future. Most of them already live on Ethereum as ERC20s. So, we think a lot about making quick work of that ERC20 converter. We think about all of the different type of stablecoin pairs that are going to live on Cardano. And beyond that, just native tokens, right? Like, yeah, ADA's, we're a single asset ledger right now, but pretty soon we're going to get this multi-asset ledger and we're going to launch, the liquid governance tokens. There'll be a liquid pool. There's going to be, tokens that are going to come over from Ethereum, maybe Chainlink.
So,
maybe
all right, crazy thing.
Okay.
What if, think about it we were talking about this platform that offers governance, right? Imagine using Liqwid, putting up some ADA's collateral for a governance token to then use that governance token to then vote. And then
that's the composability that we have to get to. Like, that's what I mean. Like, and no one has to ask Liquid to do that, right? Like, someone can just come along, look at the
because
open
if you
smart
accept
contracts.
if you accept native tokens, then that's it. Mm-hmm.
And that's the name of the game. Like, and there will be so many like tokens like that aren't even like traditional tokens the way we think about, but they're like token roles almost. So they give you the ability to play a certain position in a smart contract. I mean, you're talking about like really bespoke derivatives that you can build from these things. Like, it makes what we have right now with like Ethereum and ERC20s, I'm not even kidding, like in many ways look like a joke. So I'm excited to see like the full kind of rollout of multi-asset tokens. But yeah, there'll be way more than just ADA or, just even stable coins on Liquid. So the main play is like through governance, you'll be able to introduce new tokens. As long as there's liquidity behind it, it's listed on a couple of DEXs. We should be able to set the protocol parameters to a place, and there's a scale. They won't be set at the same borrow limits that the more liquid, ADA or US dollar stable coins are set to. But at least there'll be a market for that, and you'll be able to engage with that. It'll just be in a way that's more secure for the system because that token may be, less liquid than one of the larger tokens.
Yeah, we'll take one more and then we'll hop off here. Good questions, guys. I appreciate it as always. It's been a while since we've had a live Cardano Aura. They've been pre-recorded just due to timing, so it's nice that we can get some questions today. Can you explain again the incentive mechanism for lending? How does it relate to staking, which is always the opportunity cost for lending?
100%. Great question. So I think about this as like staking is my risk-free rate in Cardano, right? I always know I can stake to Bloom Pool, I can stake to Cardano 24 ADA pool, and I can make my 5%. But what we're offering is put your staking ADA in a pooled contract that someone can now borrow against, right? Because what you're going to earn is not just the 5% risk-free, but you're also going to earn whatever the variable outstanding borrow rate or earn rate is, right? And that's a result of someone paying a borrow rate to actually open a loan with ADA, right? So what that interest looks like and what that actual APY number looks like it's going to be totally variable and based on supply and demand. So like I said, if the supply of ADA is massive, the earn rate that you're going to make is not going to be that high. It may not even be attractive for a lot of people who have ADA. But who it is going to be used by is, DeFi power users who are already staking all their ADA and say, hey, I also want to just put it in this liquid pool because I know that I'm earning, some maybe 2-3 APYs as well as some liquid governance tokens on top of that, just to have my staked ADA sitting, in control of the smart contract that someone could borrow against, right? It's a pooled model, meaning that they're not, every time I engage with the protocol as a borrower, it's peer to pool, right? So I'm borrowing from a set amount of ADA that's been deposited over time into the liquid pool. It's not I'm borrowing from, Bloom's staked ADA, right? Or I'm borrowing from Big Pay staked ADA.
So it takes out like the total. So say if you have, you're providing liquidity and you're providing 1% of the liquidity in the pool, and
right.
Someone borrows, let's say $1,000, is that 1% taken from you? How does that work?
If you only have 1% in the total pool.
Oh, so yeah, okay, but I mean, so like relative though, relative.
Right.
Okay.
It's pro rata, exactly. It's pro rata to how much you have actually in the pool deposited, and that's the whole concept that it's pooled funds, right? So you're diversifying and distributing the risk across all of the lenders in the actual pool, and you can do that because you're going to have such a supply of ADA built up over time that each lender is only going to have a certain amount of their ADA actually being loaned out, basically, at a single given time.
Okay. It clicked for me there, man.
When you look at Compound right now, you look at how many people supply Ethereum. It's like, I think it's over 200,000 people is the number of people. So they have their Ethereum locked up in the Compound smart contract right now. But when you look at the number of outstanding borrowers, it's only like 5,000 to 6,000 people, right? So much less people are opening loans in ETH compared to how many people are supplying their ETH to earn interest, right? And that results in a low ETH earn rate around, maybe 0.5% interest, right? Plus some of the comp governance tokens they give you. On the flip side, and that's also a super low utilization rate for that ETH market, obviously. When you go to the DAI or the US dollar coin market, complete opposite, right? You have a ton of borrow demand. The rates are really attractive for both supplying and borrowing because you have near 75% utilization of those markets. So much more people are engaging on the borrow side, opening loans in stable coins than they are on Ethereum. And
yeah, it's because the demand's much higher there.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's just higher demand.
Yeah. So I said that was the last one, but there was a good one. They said, how can I get the Liqwid token? I missed that part.
Yeah, that's the whole bit, right? That's like how we do user distribution. We didn't really talk about it too much, actually, but there is going to be like a yield farming aspect to this, and there's going to be like an initial user distribution, which is totally separate from the yield farming. If you look at the recent article, and I'll send you the link to it, we wrote in Crypto AM's website. It's basically outlining how we plan on doing the user distribution allocation right now. So if you come into Liqwid with your ADA and you deposit your ADA into the Liqwid ADA pool, same as normal, you'll receive your Q tokens, your Q ADA, which is representing the amount you deposited, plus that interest that it's earning in the Liqwid pool. You'll then be able to engage with what we're calling the yield farming contract, which is I can deposit my Q ADA and I can be staking Liqwid, basically. So I'm earning a set amount of LQD governance tokens by means of locking up my liquidity provider tokens on the network. So that's going to be the yield farming aspect of it. There's also going to be a basic user community distribution, which is saying the 60% of the governance tokens, so the yield farming gets 10% of the total tokens. The actual user distribution goes to everyone who's engaging with the protocol as a lender or a borrower. So I deposit ADA or whatever US dollar coin or any asset that's supported on Liqwid, I earn a set amount of Liqwid each block, and I can kind of see that accumulating in my wallet. Same thing for the borrowers. It's split 50-50, lenders, borrowers. So the same amount of accruing Liqwid governance tokens will be based pro rata on how much you've deposited or how much you have outstanding on the lens, on the loan side, basically. So that's how it works. It's not that complicated when you understand how DeFi works today, and it's actually very similar to what Compound introduced when they did their comp token distribution. It's saying here is a set percentage. In our case, 75% of the tokens are going to both yield farming, 10%, community distribution is 60%, and the actual DAO for Liquid DAO, which will be voted on and controlled by the Liqwid users, is another 5%, right? So you're saying here's the majority of the tokens. This is the allocation over time. The yield farming will be 1% every epoch will be released onto those who are actually in the yield farming contract. The user distribution will be a set amount of liquid per block. So like think about like if 0.5 liquid each block was distributed across each of the liquid pools pro rata. So say the ADA pool had way more volume than the stablecoin at first. The ADA pool each block would be earning maybe most of that 0.5 liquid compared to the stablecoin because there's just more volume locked up in that pool. So it's a whole like contract that we've built into the governance module that controls the drip ratio and how fast that's happening in terms of the distribution of the token. But the yield farming will be very straightforward. You deposit into the system, you take your liquidity provider tokens, you put them in the yield farming contract, and you stake Liqwid. And it'll all be, we'll have LE5s and kind of documentation and visuals to show you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How do you go from starting connecting to your wallet to actually being at that last step where you're staking Liqwid with your liquidity provider tokens? It'll be a pretty simple process.
Cool. That's a great way to end, man. Great question to whoever asked it. I saw Cardano 24 reset it, so I appreciate that. It was Matsunits Kalzeka. Sorry, I'm not very cultured, but I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, Matthias is great. He's awesome. Good guy in our community, seriously.
Really? Yeah, I've never heard of him before, man. But thank you.
I talked to him a lot on Twitter. Really good guy. Well informed, like really understands the ins and outs of Cardano, and actually is someone who's not afraid to speak up on Twitter when he sees straight up FUD. And I love that. It's like so much of our community is like there's so many bright, talented individuals who are just like, they don't want to engage in like the social politics and all of like the loudness of what happens on crypto Twitter. But it is refreshing to see like a young guy who's like really, understanding, knowledgeable of the technical side of things, and also not afraid to speak up every once in a while. You know what I mean? So shout out to Matthias. Good guy.
Seriously. But that was the Cardano Or episode number 10. If you guys want to see more of this podcast, all you have to do is vote yes in Project Catalyst. Same with the Liqwid project. Vote yes. That's the first round of funding. As you can see, a lot of great things coming. This is the Cardano Or podcast. We bring the people on that provide value to the Cardano ecosystem. And it's pretty surprising that we've been 10 episodes. It really doesn't feel like that much, but I guess there's been 10 people. So, but also big shout out to our sponsor, Zelda Stake Pool. Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me on. I had a blast, seriously. Happy to come on again as we get future, closer into V1 launch and development. But yeah, this has been great. Thanks, man.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I had a blast too, and I think everybody really enjoyed it. There's a lot of people still here. I think you're definitely probably number 1 or number 2 for the Cardano Aura. So people love it, man. And I enjoyed it too, man. You definitely cleared up a little bit of the DeFi stuff in my brain, and that's what I love, man. Because this podcast, like, it's a bit for me too. I really ask curious questions, and I feel like every podcast I learn more and more, man. So I really appreciate it. But I hope you guys all have a good rest of your day. If you made it to the end of this podcast, type in number 10 in the comment section down below if you're not watching it live. But I appreciate it. See you guys.
Appreciate you too. Cheers.